Be sure to catch the new podcast, Unfiltered with Bob Z. If you prefer your information unfiltered, then you don't want to miss this podcast. Unfiltered is keeping the community informed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Unfiltered with Bob Z. I'm your host, Bob Z, and this is the podcast where we promise to keep it unfiltered. We're going to give it to you just like we get it. Today we are fortunate to have as our guest today we have Mr. James Boyd, who is the president of the Portsmouth NAACP. I'd like to welcome you to the show.
I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it for being on and looking forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, I've been trying to hunt this guy down, to try to, I really been observing and watching the things that he's been doing in the community. So I'm like, man, I gotta get up with Mr. Boyd, man.
Appreciate you.
And he's been more than accommodating. We just have to find the time to link up. So some of the questions I had a lot of questions, but I guess the first question right off the top is that, in this era, we call it, people call it the New Awakening. Personally, I kind of look at it like a second renaissance of the Civil Rights era. Mm-hmm. And my question for you is that how does it feel to be on the front lines, so to speak? So many things have changed since the unfortunate tragedy with Mr. George Floyd. It seemed to have this. I say it broke the camel's back. It broke the camel's neck. It just broke the whole camel. It was like, okay. And the thing that was really fascinating to me, I've never seen in all my life protesters in Japan, right, Korea, right, Germany, and saying, "Come on, United States, come on, United States, what are y'all doing?" So for you, we've had our own struggles here in Hampton Roads.
Yes, sir.
We were here from the beginning. So how are things changing in your point of view from being on the front line since the George Floyd tragedy? Yeah,
to put it in the backdrop of Bob of 400 years of slavery and oppression in this country. And I think what you're seeing in this moment, as you said, kind of like the second iteration of the Civil Rights Movement, you're seeing black suffrage on the international stage, right? It's almost like the, Dr. King and the movement wanted the world to see how America, America's greatest sin towards us as a people. Right. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the systemic pattern of abuse, not only at the hands of the criminal justice system, law enforcement, also economically, educationally, and in other realms. And I think you just have where a generation of people are tired of seeing it. Right, and it's an unapologetic movement. I think, being on the front lines, having been out there protesting, being in the community, there is a spirit of courage out there that I haven't seen in a while, being in the movement for a little bit. So it's encouraging, right? And we got to keep it going.
I guess one of the nicknames, and this is going somewhere with this. Yeah. One of the nicknames is the 7 cities for this area, and I always say it. I grew up in Norfolk, but I always recognize that each particular city has its own identity. I mean, generally, if you're talking to somebody and somebody say, "Well, I'm from Portsmouth," you say, "Well, I can see that." Yeah, or I'm from Virginia Beach. Yeah, you act kind of beachy. So it's very unique. So, as the president of the Portsmouth chapter, what are some of the unique challenges that you face in relationship to maybe some of the other chapters? Yeah,
I think so. Portsmouth, the demographic is majority black. It's a majority black city.
It's the only one, right?
The only one actually. You're right. In the 7 cities, but it has a deep system of tradition in it, right? And we always call Portsmouth like the smallest big city around. It's small enough where everybody knows each other, but big enough to where you can kind of form your own identity as well. But there's deep systems of bigotry and racism in it as well. So I think the challenge that we have in Portsmouth is we are trying to form an identity, right? You see a lot of things happening in some certain cases in Portsmouth, but I've always said to the leadership of the city, we can have an identity, but what is that identity going to be now going forward? Is it going to be diverse and inclusive? Is it going to be equitable and fair? And I think that's where we're at a crossroads now in Portsmouth. That's why you see the strife. You literally see ideological clash.
Wow.
And that's what's happening. You have the old guard that wants to maintain, and you have this new progressive wing of young, energetic activists that want to change the identity of Portsmouth so everybody can be involved in it.
You know, and I agree with you 100%. I remember just probably the last couple of years where I started saying, well, it's right across the water. You know, and, you know, I started really going over to some of the political activities. I remember when Don Scott was running and different political activities, I said, well, wow. When I got over to Portsmouth, I'm like, I did not know that it is a very progressive group of young African Americans that are really, really wanting to do things and make changes. And I was thinking, and I was always saying, well, why don't Norfolk and Portsmouth, if we got together, oh my God, you know. But it's the mindset is still so, you know, it's almost, and we're separated by not even a mile of the Elizabeth River. So
absolutely,
it's crazy that we don't go as a, I know it's a whole region, but just as Norfolk and Portsmouth, you know, just together, because we have many of the concerns. For example, when they put the tolls between Norfolk and Portsmouth. Right. You know, they didn't put the tolls when you know, when we used to ride down Virginia Beach on 264. The tolls are between the two working class cities that affect, I call it a tax. It is a tax. It's a user tax, actually. But, you know, when they did that, I was like, well, you know, that doesn't make sense. So I guess the question, you know, let's talk philosophy. Yeah. And obviously to serve in your role, it takes a sense of duty and consciousness. So what philosophy do you use as a guide when confronting the issues that we're dealing with?
Yeah, definitely. I think, so John Lewis, who's a civil rights icon we know, who just passed away.
Rest in peace.
Absolutely. He used the term that I think all of us subscribe to in the movement, which is nonviolent war, right? Where we have studied tactics of the civil rights movement in the 50s and the 60s. The beautiful thing about that was they were able to sustain the movement. And a lot of people really don't understand, you know, you go out there and you march, you protest, and it's like a moment, you're like, man, you know, they sustained that thing for 10 years. And that's the kind of movement that we're going to have to accomplish to change the what some people like to say, the soul of America, right? Right. And so we have to get to sustainability. So those tactics we've been looking at it, nonviolent tactics, things that our forefathers, our ancestors used to really push forth the struggle. So we've done that. Obviously, using through nonviolence, using attention and other things to bring out what's going on. But more than anything, it's the courage to stand up when it's time for us to stand up, and willing to deal with the consequences. Willing to deal with the consequences that come with the nonviolent struggle that we want to put forth in our community.
Look, how long? What year do you know? I guess you know the history of your organization. When did it first form?
Yeah, so the NAACP started in 1909.
Wow.
It formed to address lynchings in the country. Right. You had people like W.E.B. Du Bois, that was one of the founders of one of the main founders of the NAACP, also the first editor of the magazine called The Crisis, where he started to bring attention to not only Pan-Africanism, but again, the problems with lynching in America. From that time, the NAACP continued to grow, and now today it's a civil rights advocacy organization whose sole purpose is to eradicate race-based discrimination in all its forms.
Yeah, look, you mentioned W.B. Du Bois, and it was funny because I was thinking that, like, we're looking at, like, okay, Black Lives Matter, let's talk Black Lives Matter, and I was thinking, I remember the old I guess it was a philosophical struggle where you have Booker T. Washington on one end and you have W.B. Du Bois on the other end. Yeah. And I was always Team W.E. You know what I'm saying? For me, just personally, just growing up in this area. The Black Lives Matter movement has had a pretty enormous impact culturally just for the last few years. And that's why I kind of asked you, like, well, when was, when, I didn't know the exact year that the NAACP was founded. But how do you feel like the two organizations, do they support each other's goals, or how do you differ in your opinion with respect to methods? Yeah,
so let me say this out front. We got to be careful that we do not allow lettered organizations to divide us. First of all, we are Black in America. We are Black in the universe. We are family. I don't care, what way we tend to exercise and lift our voices. We're still Black. Here's the thing. It takes one voice to be listened to. It takes several voices to be heard. So the challenge that we have is we have to come together as a people. Yeah, the tactics, so the NAACP has had tactical organizational things that we've executed for years, right? And that's still the case, right? Looking at policy, how we activate, and we also do like what we call direct action, marches, protests, etc. And Black Lives Matter has the same similar tactics. They may have a different method of going about it, but still, it's still the same goal. We still have in a lot of cases, in terms of the liberation of our people. Now, there's some organizational things, values that the organization Black Lives Matter has. Now, remember, there's the outward expression that Black Lives Matter, right? Which is just a Black expression in America, internationally, as well. But then there's organizational structure of Black Lives Matter and the NAACP, where there may be some value differences, but the message is still the same: Black liberation in America. We want to eradicate Black oppression, and we want to hold systems accountable in this country to make sure that we move racism and bigotry out of the fabric of America.
Okay. I agree 100% that it's always. Even to today, we just had last night Joe Biden just announced that Kamala Harris was going to be his vice president. Right. And even today, I think I posted on my social media. I said, well, all of these people are saying, well, this happened and that happened. I was like, the only game they have, their only shot is to divide us. Right. That's it. Because if we move as a bloc. In anything, if we just took all our money and said, well, we want to buy Idaho. Yeah.
Listen, we are the most resourceful people in the history of the world. We have been able to endure so much and still survive. If you think about the Black experience, the human experience that we have endured, from slavery to Jim Crow to even instances now where we still yet survive, we can pull things together, and that's the message that we want to put out in our community in Portsmouth. Like, here's the thing: we don't have to be defined by what society tells us we should be. We can come together and rally around each other. Yes, we have differences. That's fine. We're going to continue to have differences. Exactly. But at the end of the day, there's certain things, there's certain commonalities that we have that we should not ever be divided on, right? And that's the thing that we got to be careful. We got to be careful about the political party system trying to divide us. We got to be careful about certain factions trying to divide us in the Black community. And that's why with our branch particularly, I made it very clear that I don't care, what your philosophical issue is. You should be able to stand up and advocate for the liberation of our people, period, to end racism. So that's the kind of atmosphere we got to have, especially now, and politically we got to have it. Right,
indeed. That's how.
Register to vote.
Register to vote, and vote.
And vote, right? Register and vote.
I think that's consciously. That may be our Achilles heel, that division piece. I mean, I guess they used to call it crabs in the barrel or whatever, phrase you want to attach to it, but it's basically just divide and conquer. Right. Because. If we ever do anything and just move as a people, and I always said that about, let's say, voting, and it was like, well, I remember in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act, came about. It's actually 65, I think, when it was signed. But 1964, that's when the Republicans, we moved from the Republican Party because the Republican Party, most of us were in the Republican Party as a bloc. I mean, I think it was. I think they said that after that 40% voted, Republican or something like that. But when the Republicans failed to support the civil rights legislation, that's when we became Democrats. And I was just thinking, speaking of what we're talking about, moving as a bloc. Hey, if the Democrats mess up, we'll move again. You know what I mean?
I mean, I would say it started even back to where Roosevelt, when he started during the Depression, when he started putting in the New Deal and social programs. I think we started to shift even then. Right. And here's the thing: so you would have to where a lot of things that that we are advocates for may lie in the party, but it doesn't mean in the Democratic Party. It doesn't mean that we don't hold that party accountable.
Right.
It doesn't mean that and that's what we got to really start to understand is we have to be issue-based voters. Hey, at the end of the day, yes, we want to be a part of it, but the question is, does the party want us? See, and that's how we got to flip it.
Right.
Hey, if you want us to be a part of it, you have to be inclusive. No longer is this, and this is the beauty about the moment now, Bob. No longer is it this atmosphere of I'm voting Democrat just because.
Right.
Now you have to show and prove, and you have to say, hey, how am I going to address the serious disparities in this country? What kind of appropriation bills am I going to put up to make sure that we start to get financial resources flowing, particularly in the black community? Something I addressed with Senator Warner when he had a roundtable the other day, which he had some great ideas about. Using some of the Federal Reserve processes to help to flow monies into banks to go directly to the black community. We have to start making sure and holding them accountable to that. And when we start doing that, what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing certain things start to be addressed. And not only do we got to go out there, register to vote, and like you said, consciously vote. After that, we got to hold them accountable.
Got to hold them accountable, and that's the whole piece is that. You could say anything about. I mean, every ethnic group they have their issues. Right. But for the most part, we're not gonna vote against our self-interest. I mean, because I see that a lot when you take let's say people out in rural areas and people out in like the coal mine areas and will actually vote to take money out of their pockets and food off their tables because the party that they vote for, and you know who you are, they don't support people who are working class and coming up. It's just the policies just don't fit. So we're gonna move on. But recently, you and your vice president, I saw that and I was like, whoa, man, they mess with my dude. Like this, it's like they were arrested by the Portsmouth police, and dealing with the Confederate, but what did they charge you with, and how's the case looking now? So
they ended up charging us with trespassing on the Confederate Monument. That was the charge. We were taken downtown, cuffed, shackled for about between 30 to 45 minutes, close to an hour. For what they said was trespassing. Now, let me go back to this to get the backdrop.
Give me the backdrop.
So we have been advocating for the removal of the monument now. I mean, I know the branch has been advocated for years, but when I became president, we started in 2015 and had a big press conference after some city leaders, the former mayor, Kenny Wright, and Dr. Mark Whitaker, who was on council at the time, was pushing for this agenda on council to have it removed. We went out there to support it and to advocate for it to be removed. We did in 2015. After Charlottesville, we did it again in 2017 when the current mayor, John Rowe, came out and said, I'm for it being removed. I'm going to put for it being removed. I have the votes on council for it to be removed. Had a press conference then. It was supposed to be removed then because the census on council was majority. We want to get it moved, right? We want to move it out of Times Square.
Right.
But they, through maneuvering tactics, through this delay tactics, which is what racism does and bigotry does, they use these tactics in the court. They went through all these maneuvers and saying, oh, well, we don't own it, we can't move it, blah, 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 blah. We fast forward to 2020. George Floyd happens. So you got all these situations going on in George Floyd, but I can name William Chapman. I mean, I can go
Breonna,
down the list there, but even in our city, what we've seen, I can name the list of names. So we go to the monument and advocate for the removal again. Now, council says they're going to bring it up. They're going to talk about it. They have a council meeting. They did the delay tactic again. So that night before we were arrested, we went out there to the monument to protest. And the rules said that you have the right to cover the monument, not to face it.
Right.
So we went out there the night before and put covers over it. This was late Tuesday night, about 11, and we were there till about 3 o'clock in the morning. The covers over it. The police chief then and the city attorney said, hey, it's good as long as you don't, it's lawful as long as you don't deface the monument. Cool. I get word the next morning, early Wednesday, about 7 a.m., that somebody came and were taking the covers off, right? Well, I wanted my covers. I was like, wait a minute, those mine. You ain't taking them. Give me my stuff. You know what I mean? Right. And we had the Black Lives Matter stuff. Oh, I want that. And so I went out there too, and we had the right to cover it, to put the cover back up there.
Right.
So if the monument in Portsmouth, there's a fence around the monument.
Right.
That you can either go on the outside and protest or go on the inside. We had the clearance again from the police chief and the city attorney not only hours before that you can be in there. You can be in that area. Now, though, this time now, when it's in the light of day, now it's trespassing. Now it's against the law. And again, they were trying to make a model of us. Their situation was if we cut the head off, then this will cut it off. So how do you go from something being legally sanctioned and then illegal within 5 to 6 hour span? You don't. So we were arrested for trespassing on the monument, which again we had the authorization by the city to do it 6 hours before.
When I saw it, I was like, wait, you know, because it was chaos. I mean, a lot of times, I mean, and I understand, you know, with the emotions and, you know, the people, I mean, it's, I've always, and even with the monument that sits right outside this building was removed, but, you know, and people would challenge me on this, and I say, well, look, you know, I don't care how many monuments, they can remove all the monuments in this whole country, but until you remove the monuments in your mind, you know, take away the Confederate monuments that's in your mind, then you're going to still be subject to, you know, to that same kind of mental slavery that's gonna tie you down. So, you know, that's just my little rant about that. Where
I get you. There's more than just physical monuments, right? There's the monument of economic oppression. There's the monument of educational disparity. There's several monuments that we have to tear down, but certainly we want the physical manifestation of racism and bigotry to become down, because it makes a statement. And real quick, Reagan, even if you go to a conservative Republican, Ronald Reagan went to Berlin and said, knock down this wall, so that it could be a healing. Well, we're saying the same thing. Listen, take down these symbols of oppression so that we can get to some semblance of equity and fairness in our communities, and we don't have to continuously look at this oppressive, racist and bigoted symbol, because that's not the kind of symbol that we want in the city, unless you want it. Unless you want to protect that philosophy, then you have an issue with it. But if you want to be inclusive and fair, listen, take it down. Let's move forward.
Well, you've heard it. You've heard, you know, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Absolutely.
We want you to come back. You know, we're going to come back. You know, we're not only going to talk about when things are wrong. You know, I want you to come back when things are better, and we continue to make progress.
Absolutely.
Because we're not going to stop until we do. So it's a nonstop. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd, President of the Portsmouth chapter of the NAACP. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
And have a great day.